Hi. Now, I'm going to talk about narcissism here. And um, warning, I'm a long winded person. I'll try to get to the points here, but I think it's nice to take the long, flowery route. There's value. I don't think it's without value to be long winded anyway. So I was just watching a video. I guess I should say my name's Aaron. I'm Aaron. Um, and What are my qualifications for talking about narcissism? Just somebody who struggles with it themselves and from their childhood, with their parent and stuff like that. So, you know, if there's any value in what I have to say, then that's the qualification in itself. So I was just watching a video um, called Seven Signs That You Were Raised by a Narcissistic Parent or by a Narcissist. And it was really good. I enjoyed it, and it definitely I think like 6 out of the 7 signs was a clear yes to me. Um, and So, anyways, I love reading the comments in these types of videos. I've been watching in the last few years or whatever. I've been watching a lot more of this kind of stuff, and the comment sections are actually almost like more valuable than the video. There's a lot of value in there because people they're pretty unique amongst comment sections where there's many. Most of the comments are just very brief synopses of the trauma and struggle with narcissism and an issue in their own life, whether it's what their upbringing with their parents, sometimes siblings, or now as an adult with their relationships, usually with uh, the girlfriend, the wife, the boyfriend, the husband, that kind of thing. Um, or even your family once you're an adult and whether or not you need to separate from your family and that sort of thing. But okay, so when I hear about people talking about this stuff, I sometimes uh, find myself wanting to steer some of the discussion in a bit of a different direction because I feel like I've written some points down here, which I don't usually do, but I kept losing my train of thought, um, so I wanted to have some points here. Basically, I think I don't really like oftentimes or sometimes how the term narcissism or narcissist, I think more specifically, is used, and I think it's a misnomer and possibly a misnomer and or a harmful label, or it's just misapplied a lot of times and things like this. I think the whole point of all the discussion in these videos and all the videos on the subject and all the books on the subject and everything and all the suffering we've gone through, I think the whole point is that we want to heal. We don't want it to happen. We want to heal. If you have a narcissistic parent or husband or wife or something, I mean, ultimately, would you not want them to heal and you to heal and everything to be better? I think, of course, I think so. Um, Pardon me if I get a little shaky here. I'm just holding the phone in my hand, so it's about healing, right? So it's about understanding what's going on, what this thing is, and really, really, really understanding it and and healing through it. And obviously, there's so much material and content about this, about doing this stuff. But I tend to find myself being a little like, hey, let's keep the discussion here focused on that. Um, I get that people are angry at, you know, their narcissist and what they've done, right? Whatever abuse that they've suffered at the hands of anyone. Um, so totally get it that there's anger about that, and I have a lot of anger too. It's buried deep. So um, basically, let me see here how to segue. I'm not very good, I think, with the segues. I just whatever comes into my mind is kind of a um, so. I think the whole thing with like narcissism, codependency, this type of thing, I like to call it a spectrum. It's a spectrum, um, and uh, on one end of the spectrum, um, I guess is like on the extreme end of narcissistic spectrum would be like the psychopath, or just the living incarnate of pure evil or something like this, um, which seems to be irredeemable. Maybe that's a whole subject to talk about in, I think, a different video or something. But that's like the one extreme, and then the other, um, and I don't know if it's just a line with opposing sides. I feel like it's more like different sides of a coin or something like this. Different faces of the beast or something. But um, stop fidgeting, Aaron. Okay. And then, like codependency or whatever, I guess is a little more on the other side, and like the fragility. So, so yeah, definitely. I for sure am. It's just tickling my nose here, but I for sure am like a fragile or covert narcissistic person. I don't want to say I'm a fragile narcissist. Um, I don't like that. Um, but because I want to do better, I want to heal. I want to be a better person. At least I believe I do. I think so, for sure. We all have doubts about all this stuff. I have doubts about it. There's good moments and bad moments when you're more positive and more negative and stuff, and that's the whole. That's a big, quite central to the struggle of these issues. So, I think that what it really is, you can say narcissism or narcissist or this or that, but it's a wound, right? It's a wound. These things are a response to trauma, to abuse, and I think it's a survival. I think it's perhaps like a survival mechanism. So it's like, I guess it's useful when you're maybe a child and you're fairly helpless. You're not helpless, but to some degree, I guess you are, and probably you actually you are fairly helpless. I mean, you could do it, but you need your parents' love and validation and support and all these things. Security, you need security. Um, you do need those things. Those are needs. So so it is survival. So when you're so upset, you're basically in the wilderness. You come into the world, and you're in this traumatic place. It's a battlefield, and the ones who are supposed to love you and be there, your parents and family, and everyone else, but you're primarily your parents. Um, they're not even on your team. They're not you know they're not really on your team, and obviously it's the spectrum. So, but basically they're not on your team, or they kind of are, kind of aren't. It's that combination. That's why it's so confusing partly, and um, but they're not really on your team. They're more on their own team, right? It's every man for himself, and even though it's your own parent, and it's incredibly painful and bewildering because you're on the battlefield here. It's cold, it's dark, it's rainy, it's scary. There's beasts around the corner and stranger people who have their own thoughts and desires and darkness and everything. And so you need somebody because you're a child. You need someone to shelter you and protect you and teach you and guide you and all this stuff, right? And when you don't get that, you plus the abuse, um, I think what happens, you get the wound, and I think what happens, and I think that this is like the part that I think needs to be talked about more and more crystallized to understand it, is that like you get like a fractured self. And maybe this is already, maybe everyone knows this, but I feel like people don't talk about this stuff as much. It's usually about like identifying the narcissist, going no contact with them and stuff like this, and that's all fine, whatever, but I want to really understand it because I suffer from it myself and I deal with it, and obviously that means I attract other people in relationships that also have it. So it's, so it's, we want to heal here. We want to really, really understand what it is. And I think what happens, the trauma from the neglect and abuse, you end up getting a fractured identity, a fractured self, to some degree. And obviously, it's another spectrum, um, or it is the spectrum that you get a split personality. And I had some thoughts on this like more recently, and I felt like it was kind of a revelation because, I'm a flip flopper. I'm somebody, and I would guess that any person struggling with narcissism, these issues, is not any of them, but most of them, right? um, are flip floppers because we don't know our own selves, and so you have these fractured selves, and so basically the wound, it's so agonizing and painful and raw and just tender, and you try to cover that up, um, with whatever means you can at the time, with what seems suitable at the time. um, and for someone like myself and many people, I suppressed my emotions. I remember being a kid thinking to myself, I can't, I can't let my feelings, you know, be in control. I can't act like these other people in my family. There was plenty of arguing and upset and fights in my family. I mean, not that much, I feel. I'm sure compared to many families, there was probably very little. I don't know, but still, it was just like that, the atmosphere and um, the state of things. And and when I saw the fights and the arguments and the issues, and basically, I guess you see betrayal and abandonment of, like, let's say your siblings by your mother or parent. I feel, because I'm the youngest, I feel like in my mind, and I was just like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to go through what they're going through. I can see, they're getting now. My brother's a deserter on the battlefield. My sisters are being pitted kind of against each other, and they're all being kind of abandoned, neglected, and tossed out onto the battlefield. And I'm like, I don't want that. So I became like a goody two shoes mama's boy, and I was rewarded. I was rewarded for that. I became, as a kid, the stories are still being told to this day of how I, in ways, was like this perfect kid that never complained, never was upset, never really cried, never, I did chores, I was helpful, all these things, right? And so that caused a whole other problem with me of being the golden child and contributing to my narcissistic ego, which is part of the fracture itself, because you're not, when you suffer this trauma and abuse and neglect, you're not able to be yourself, or at least you feel that you aren't. It feels like you're going to die or something. It's very painful, it's very real, and you feel like you can't be yourself. So you have to, and to please your parent, to try to, and whoever's in your life, you have to be someone else for them, right? You have to please them. And so, and these things are obviously, again, a spectrum, but often it amounts to this type of thing, I think, for many of us, that we're not good enough. Whatever the different reasons are, we're criticized, we're dismissed, this, that, the other, um, and we learn that we can't be us. We don't, and it goes so deep that you actually, because you're a kid and you just, it's like you're in like a tornado, like a vortex of of pain and emotion and thoughts, and you get lost. The real you, gets lost in that. That's too chaotic, right? It's too painful. And so the real you gets lost, and through, I think, through various mechanisms, this happens, that your personality, um, and persona gets split, right? The narcissism, I think, is a mental conceptual, I don't know if it's completely, but perhaps primarily a mental conception of who you are to please other people, and to also defend yourself and feel like you um, are somebody, worthwhile, somebody who has maybe some strength or some value or something. So that's why these things are so delicate, because it's like, if I chose narcissism, which clearly it seems like I chose it, and I'm trying to take as much accountability about these choices as I can, and I'm failing, but as long as there's progress, that's what's important, and I'm trying to need some breakthroughs. But like the idea that like I chose it, and I'm so I know I kind of switch between speaking about like in general and then like kind of myself. Obviously, I think through the lens of my own experience a lot, but I try to apply it all universally. But it seems like I chose narcissism. But what did I really choose? I don't think I chose. I don't think a person with like a fragile narcissist or whatever um, chooses to be a bad person. I don't think that's the thought. You're a kid and you're trying to survive and you're trying to protect yourself. You're not like, I'm going to be a bad person. No. You're like, I'm going to try to get love and have my needs met. And not only needs met, but have protection and safety, right? Because you got your needs of love and validation and stuff like that. But you also need to be safe and not under physical threat and things like that, or to be able to eat. Sometimes the parent can send you home, send you to bed without dinner or whatever. And obviously these things can be quite extreme, but sometimes they're very subtle. So anyways, you're not trying to be a bad person, but it does become a bad person because in some ways you're going to end up reflecting abuse onto other people, um, because your fractured self, you don't get to really feel things and be a true player on the battlefield. um, no man is an island. You're out there by yourself. You need to have a team. But because you're like, you've been pushed out, you've been betrayed, and you're all alone, you have to kind of set up this one man little island of your ego and narcissistic belief about who you are to please them, to protect yourself. And this becomes, the grandiosity about yourself, the conception and lie and delusion, these beliefs, these thoughts about yourself that can, I guess they protected you in those years against your abusers and neglectors, your narcissistic parents. And I guess, there's so many things involved in this stuff. Like I had a single mother, and I had a father who was around a very, very little bit, and I just when I was like a baby, and I have almost no memory of him, very, very little, just about nothing. So this is something I guess I need to heal and practice more, is like trying to understand how the absence of my alcoholic, probably narcissistic father also was, a betrayal and, neglect and abuse, because so much of my anger seems to have turned onto women and my mother in a very deep-seated way. And, I guess that's a tragic thing because, in my mind, I was always like, well, and I still say it to myself. So, I'm still trying to get this stuff sorted out. I got to get into therapy here again soon, probably for maybe the rest of my life. Who knows? But I need to, you know, sort these things out of where, a lot of it, to whatever degree, is misplaced onto my mother and not onto the absent person. The absent person seems in some ways, probably for many of us, to get a free pass because you're just like, well, they weren't there. So all the suffering was because of my mom or whatever. And it's like, well, no, it's not. Um, you know, and you're certainly aware that you don't have a father growing up. And I think as a boy, you're like, where's my image? You know, you're made in the image of God. I was made in the image of my father. I'm like, where is he? I don't even have him. I'm just like, so that's a horrible thing. So, all right, anyways, I go on down these different trains of thought. So the fractured self, you know, your identity is split. Um, you got no team. You don't know who you are because you build up this idea and these behaviors and thoughts to please other people, other narcissists and whatever. Um, uh, and then part of the split of your personality is um, the hurt inner child, right? The real you. The real you, I think, is the inner child, the wounded person, and it doesn't go away. It's still there, but you have a split. And you know, I read a comment maybe like last week or something, and they said very succinctly, there's the narcissist is three people. I can't remember what the third one was. It was like one was there was the dark side, the dark self, the hurt inner child, and then there was the third one. And I thought that was really good. It was really true. I think it was a good one. But all right, so let me read a bit of my points here. Um, Suppression of emotion and feelings, right? So that's like an active suppression, and I think I've already been touching on this. You know, I can speak for myself on this, and I think that it's something that other people do as well. Actively suppressed my own self, right? I was like scared, and I saw the fights with my other siblings and stuff, and what's going on, and I have my needs, and I'm like, for me to survive here, I can't be me. I can't express what I need, you know, what I'm afraid of, what I like or don't like, and whatever, like, you know, what I want to do in life, my personality. So I actively suppressed my own self, my own emotion, my own feelings. I remember, like I said, telling myself in my mind, it's such a clear memory to me, and I suppose that's part of the tragedy is how powerful it was that I remember my eyes closed and thinking so powerfully that like I can't feel, I can't have these feelings, I can't allow them to run me because it's going to result in the chaos that I see in my family, and I need to solve the problems. I need to solve their problems, you know. So my mind is taking over and suppressing, um, and that's how you kind of become this like know-it-all, right? This narcissist know-it-all who is so convicted of what they think, and what they think becomes like their identity, right, of who they are, but it's not actually who you are. And this is like the big problem I have is I'm 38 years old now, and I'm still like just really learning and realizing how deep it really goes, and just how it is that I don't like know who I am. I mean, I'm sure the real me is here and has been present throughout my life, on some level in some areas and things, right? But I don't know. It's hard to tell. It seems like the main thing has been the narcissism, the ego, the that fractured self, the false conceptual self, um, and that's built on mental conception and stuff, not on actual experience, right? It's not built on mastery. It's not built on experience or and real skills and things. So it's like I have all these opinions on everything, just about strong opinions and strong judgments. You know, I guess I've been a very I've been a judgmental person. That's something I learned in my family was judgments, and I always felt like I wasn't a judgmental person. But you know, I've been having these issues with people my whole life that crop up here and there, or get pointed out here and there. They're always there, but they get pointed out here and there, for what they are. And so, you know, I've been aware of it on some level, but I didn't know how deep it went. So the fractured self, the loss of identity, the split personality, you know, and so that can be more extreme than others, right? The split and the fracture can be more subtle, you know, more medium or more extreme. Um, and you know, I don't know if that's related to like the official split personality or schizophrenic, you know, type of personality disorders. I don't know if that's related I would imagine it probably is, um, under some extreme trauma and abuse, that the split becomes so strong and distinct that it really becomes like, like these almost living entities of differentiation, um, and that aren't the true you. And it's a crazy thing, right? That's a crazy thing. That's how powerful the mind is, that it can create layers of defenses for yourself and layers of image to others that aren't even the real you. And it was to protect yourself. And I try to wrestle with the idea that maybe some of my choices, that poor me, and I was protecting myself. But if I chose narcissism as a response, then did I make some bad choice? Like, I'm just a human, so maybe it was selfish and harmful to others, and I've been perpetrating things on others, and maybe just justifying it to myself, with the poor me story and things like this, which is true. And as a kid, I guess, you're not at fault, um, but you become an adult and then you're at fault, and then everyone's like, well, you got no excuse anymore. And that's hard and painful because you don't even really understand. You're so confused. You're just like, well, this is just the way I am. This is who I am. I'm not a bad person. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. But then someone might be like, well, on some level, you actually are. And you just, to me, like, you don't really know it. You're still on that battlefield as a kid, in your mind and in your emotion, right? That's why you get triggered so easily, um, by rejection, or by criticisms, or any sort of failure or difficulty you have. A lot of things can trigger strong emotional reactions, emotional dysregulation. I like that term from Crappy Childhood Fairy. And I mean, I guess she didn't come up with it, but I really like it. CPTSD, I believe that I do suffer from that, and so many people do. So, anyways, it's a wound. It's a mental, emotional wound and trauma survival mechanism, because we need to be full sovereign individuals, full human beings who are in our true self and capable to both attack and defend on the battlefield with courage and bravery. Um, that's what life is, right? And I mean, it just makes sense, because that's why people like me and stuff, like, you go through your whole life. I got a lot of life left to live. I know that, but so far, I've never felt like I had a tribe, or like I belonged anywhere. I've always felt like an outcast, like no one, no one listens to me, no one believes me. I don't belong anywhere, and I have deep issues of underneath the narcissism, and my underneath it, I struggle with feelings of self-worth, feelings of being worthless, of being no good, of being a bad person, of being an evil, harmful, person. I was depressed for, like, I don't know, 12-ish years or whatever, uh, diagnosed with dysthymia, chronic depression. And I believe I did get over that, but I do still struggle with negative thinking towards myself. And, so you interact with people in relationships, and when you're going through your life, it's this narcissistic, mental construct of who you are, right? Which includes what you think and all these things, your thoughts, your beliefs, um, your view of yourself and others. And that's what interfaces with most people most of the time, and including yourself. And so that's why people can be like, well, you're lying to yourself. It's like, yeah, I am. But it's not quite so simple to say that you're lying to yourself. Um, it's more like you're fooling yourself. I mean, lying yourself. Yeah, anyway. So struggling with negative thoughts. I still struggle with negative thoughts, and towards myself. I used to beat myself up with every worst word I could think of. Every mean, rude insult, every horrible denigration I could conjure in my mind. I would lie there in a ball, just telling myself how horrible and terrible I was. And in a way, it kind of soothes yourself. It's like it's a weird, sick thing. Like it's kind of soothing, but it also feels horrible, right? It's horrible, and it's an awful thing. And then you kind of come out of it, and you're like, oh, let's just slip back onto that narcissistic mask or whatever, that fractured self. That let's put that persona back on, get back out there. And and that works a lot. Obviously there are people who go through their entire lives and never really acknowledge or heal this kind of stuff, and they can be very successful in various ways. Right, so there's a lot of function involved in this fracture of self, in this persona. Now this is pretty long, but I mean, hey man, why not? I used to call my, like, part of my built up self and fracture. I used to call it my sentinel. Like it felt like a sentinel, this like stone obelisk of like protection, and to suppress my feelings and stuff. And because many times I would feel numb, lack empathy, lack appropriate emotion. Usually that's in the form of empathy and sensitivity to others, and because I had kind of concreted that part of myself down um, years ago. So it's not that I didn't want to feel it for people anymore. I do, but it's like I couldn't. It's once that concrete sets, it's hard to break the concrete, right? It's soft until it sets. So, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll wrap this up. Did I really get out my points of, the fractured self, loss of identity? I think that these are the most important aspects to focus on and to understand. Um, the idea of like calling someone a narcissist, there does seem to be a distinction of when that's actually appropriate. Because I'm not going to just throw that out. Obviously, I'm using the words a lot. Like it's convenient. That's kind of whatever. But like saying, "Oh, this is a narcissist," I feel like that's somebody who's down that spectrum to a degree that's um, harmful and dangerous enough to justify that. And maybe they don't have very little or no self-awareness and reflection to know that they're have a problem and a desire to fix it and things like that, and the level of damage that they can do because of that